With humans wiping out half of the dragons, the other races began to grow fearful. Who would be next in this purge? So easily their weapons could be turned to the north, to the others. Would they be a crusade marked down in the humans' history books? Race by race, the elves, giants, and Mer pushed into human lands, claiming territory for their own, for they would not sit idly by and wait to be conquered. They had no idea. The humans had no interest in fighting back, for they were too busy fighting one another to unite under the same banner. They yearned for unification, but had no idea how to go about it. There is an island to the south of the human continent, Rorin. It is considered the home of horses, and to a special metal only called Rorian steel. Rorin would also be the home of one of the greatest kings humanity would come to know. Marwynn, Lord of Rorin, would see the other races grasping land and become angry at the humans' unwillingness to act. For if they couldn't unite, they would fall. He had fallen for a mergirl that had come to Rorin in search of trade and a home. It crushed him when the love of his life was taken away by the arrow of an elvish scout. Through his pain and anger, he looked forward to the other humans, almost more angry that they didn't act. He was hurt, but it was clear what needed to be done. So he took his brother Aegwyn and his closest friend Nefumi, the Blue, and set off with an army toward the mainland. This land wasn't quite prepared for the onslaught Marwynn would bring, but that would happen later. At first, it began with his armies touching down on the southwest part of the continent, a country called Lys. This country was ruled by a tyrant known as the Spider Queen. She was known for making marriage alliances with the other lords and then killing them when she got them alone. Marwynn's brother Aegwyn begged to go and try to talk things out before attacking a stranger. Marwynn didn't wish for his brother to die, but his will was not some weak thing Marwynn could control. Aegwyn set out as a diplomatic envoy, only to be returned to the Queen's wall as a piked head. Marwynn and his tiny force began to retreat, arrows and soldiers swarming out to meet them. Through the safety of Lys's woods, Marwynn's troops continued to retreat, coming into the open and continuing to hold rank, their shields up and together, just like a phalanx. The Spider Queen marched on him at full force. Thousands of purple shields met his own, purple spears cutting through his front line of infantry. A rumble on the ground is the last thing the Lys soldiers heard. Marwynn's heavy cavalry swept over either side of their lines, catching them in a rough double envelopment outside of the trees. You could call the Battle of the Webwoods a battle, as the storytellers did, or you could call it what it really was, a slaughter. 600 men and women threw down their arms, surrendering to the foreigner that had conquered them so easily. Marwynn wasn't here to destroy. He was here to unite. He had no use for piles of bodies. This wasn't a purge. 600 men and women joined the ranks of Marwynn, now bolstering his force up to about 5,000. The next thing on Marwynn's mind was the Spider Queen. He couldn't afford to siege the castle, but he didn't have that kind of time. Humans were losing land by the day, and he didn't know how long it would be until they were under someone else's boot. Marwynn called for the Spider Queen to end the battle and give up her crown. In her madness, she cursed his name and sent her troops to guard the gate, raising the drawbridge. But when they laid eyes upon Marwynn and his army, the guards quickly struck a deal with the foreign lord, their lives, in exchange for the gate coming down. When the drawbridge dropped, thousands of men and women rushed into the city. the guards standing down so that the army could make it into the Spider Queen's palace with ease. The purging of the spider's nest began with the Queen's household guard. They were the first ones to come to her defense. They arrived and gave a good fight before Marwynn's forces washed over them. There were far too many. The death of Aegwyn had clouded Marwynn's mind. He wanted to rip the Queen away from her fake throne. The Queen fired an arrow at Marwynn, only for his guard, Nefumi, to step in and take the arrow in the back. Though it was laced with poison, it never actually made it through his armor, only making him ill. When he saw a lance impale the Queen from behind, he was shocked. In front of him now stood a dragoon. The dragoon introduced himself as Richard Sly. He claimed to support Marwynn's cause and asked to join the King's Guard. Marwynn claimed he didn't have one, for he was no king. The dragoon disagreed, for Marwynn was the king they needed in his eyes. Marwynn accepted, but stated that his friend Nefumi would have to become Lord Commander, for he had risked life for the young lord. In that instant, he went from Lord of Roran to King of Roran. And so began the struggles of unification.